What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. My name is Cameron Selby here with Emery Cuzzy. Today we're going to go over our mock draft results for our final mock. Obviously, we live streamed and had a blast with everybody that tuned in. But today we're going to show how we did, break it down a little bit. Kind of middle in the pack, but we hit some goals that we wanted, and we're just going to walk you through our final thoughts and how it compared to how it actually panned out.
Yeah, we really appreciated y'all being here for the live stream. Like Cam said, we're going to go over multiple of not just our mock draft, but also a bunch of really great analysts in this field do it all the time. We're going to compare to them and see how we looked. But to start it off, I mean, basically everybody knew what was happening at the beginning of the draft.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, it was pretty chalky. You see greens across the board. The first 6 selections, obviously, we didn't nail the J.J. McCarthy getting traded up for, but we got the combination to them going to Minnesota. They just traded up a little lighter.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go all the way up to 5. And then, obviously, the first miss for everybody was Joe Alt going to the Chargers. That is something that we had as our plan B for the Chargers. If they were to stay put, that would have been our pick. And we had that in our first mock point 1.0.
Right.
Obviously, we had them going tackle even in a trade back. So everybody got a point for that. But just to point out, we had that nail on the head if we just would have stuck with it at the start.
Well, with them also, if you look at, our 1.0, of course, we had them, but then also what would we do? We thought the best option was to go Joe Alt. It wasn't to move back and possibly get a different guy because we do see him as the number 1 option at the position by far. There was even our number 2 at the position went 4th overall.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, it was a little bit muddier after Joe Alt. So we thought Chargers, pick the guy, set your offense up for what Jim Harbaugh wants to do, and that's what they go and do. So,
right.
Yeah,
and then obviously we had them Joe Alt going to Tennessee, and it's a trickle down from there because Tennessee, obviously, we knew that they were going tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one that we're probably happy compared to others that they did go different. So we all get yellows across the board because we wouldn't have had J.C. Latham going to them at 7, and a lot of people probably would have been there because, again, we were much lower on JC compared to the consensus.
Yeah, and we talked about it prior, in all of our mock drafts and everything, that I did not believe that Joe Alt would be at 7. And that was kind of the thing that I wanted to keep saying, because he's so much better of a player, where we rank him as a prospect and where everybody had him on the big boards is above 7. It's at 4 or 5. And so Tennessee didn't get the opportunity to take him. They go J.C. Latham. We don't necessarily agree with it, but we knew it was tackle. We got a yellow for that. Moving on from there, splash play right here, Atlanta, what are we doing? And It's not even that. I understand the thought process overall. It's just, you're not setting your team up to win in a division where you can win the division for sure. I mean, the NFC South right now is it's the worst, most likely the worst division in football. If I can't even think of one off the top of my head that even comes close. And so them going double quarterback, getting their quarterback, of course, in the next couple of years that they're going to have coming out. But I just don't understand it, because if Kirk Cousins does play well and you pay him his $90 million for the first 2 years and then don't get out of his contract, you just wasted a first round pick, a number 8 pick, where you could have improved your defense.
Yeah, I mean, the tandem, it's not the Penix really that brings the move down or the decision down for me. It's more so their prior decision, which was investing over $100 million in Kirk Cousins. It makes sense to have a security plan. Like you see an Achilles injury for Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, you think it's the same thing. Well, no. Aaron Rodgers, it's his lead foot, and then it's Kirk Cousins' plant foot. That's a much more significant, hoping that it's not as serious as it is, because you lose the velocity, the power, all that good stuff. So they wanted a security plan in place, and maybe this guy was the guy. But if he ends up taking over, then you're eating a ton of dead cap over the next 2 years, because there is an early out after 2 seasons, but that's still 2 seasons.
Yeah, we talk about Russell Wilson with the Broncos. They're hurting right now. We'll talk about them obviously in a second, quarterback situation, but they're hurting right now.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to be out of it after this year, and they're going to have a situation where they can build off of it. Atlanta, they kind of backed themselves into a corner in a lot of ways because, okay, they don't want the number one. Say they don't want the number one defensive player. They got calls. It wasn't that they weren't getting calls. I know the Raiders called.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Raiders were trying to get up to 8. I bet Minnesota might have called. Atlanta staying and taking Penix is the fact that if you couldn't move off the pick, that would be one thing. And you're like, hey, I would have taken him.
There were suitors.
Yeah, people were trying to get him, move up, maybe get JJ, whoever it was for that team. And
well, it's kind of similar to New England. Just they ended up being stubborn and staying where they got a 3 first-round pick offer from Minnesota.
Mhm.
They got a multi-first-round pick offer from New York, and they decided to stay put and take Drake May.
Yeah.
So all of the New England willing to move back, that was all scuttlebutt from the start. Obviously, if you feel a certain type of way about a player, you're gonna stay there no matter what, and that seems like that's what Atlanta ended up doing.
right.
So another pick that we had initially and we moved off of because of the Keenan Allen thing. Chicago going with Roma Dunze. We had them trading back 1 or 2 spots in this draft and taking an edge.
Right.
And obviously they went with the receiver, the luxury pick. Kind of mixed feelings about it. You had 4 picks to begin with, none in the last 3 rounds. You would have thought that they would have tried to get some extra assets on top. That's the reason behind our trade back in our final mock. And then also, you need defenders. You don't need playmakers at the very moment.
Yeah, it's like you said, luxury, but at the same time, my biggest thing is if you're going to do this, you are giving Caleb Williams everything.
Right.
That's like, and I get it from that side. It's like, here's 3 really good receivers, a solid backfield. They even go and get a backup tackle guard mix in Kieran Amagaji later. Didn't understand the punter situation, but whatever. That's
we'll
another
get into
time.
that.
But
the love
but I think they did. If for what they were trying to do, I don't think they did a bad job of it.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't the
path
we would have.
It's certainly like you hit the nail on the head. It's not something we would have done as GMs, but it's not going to make a hate list by any means.
Right.
We were high on Odunze, and there was a reason that we had neighbors going to Chicago with our first mock, and it was basically whoever the wide receiver 3. That's what our target was at the time. We moved off of that, and they decided to stay with that. A couple people were correct on that, but a lot of people thought maybe tackle or edge was the way to go.
Yeah, I think it tells us though what they're going to do with Keenan Allen, and I don't think we knew prior to this if they were going to re-sign him or not. I don't think he's coming back after that.
Right, exactly. And then all of a sudden, you 1-year rental for a 2nd round pick. So that's kind of the tough thing about it. But yeah, moving on. Minnesota, like we said earlier, selected JJ McCarthy. Didn't have to trade 3 firsts or even 2 for that matter. They ended up, making this trade, and then a trade we'll talk about in a moment. Basically, all their mid-round picks this draft and next year's draft are gone, but they got 2 very solid players.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to look at it like they have Sam Darnold. They didn't give up all the picks, like you said, so they were able to get a really solid edge later. And my biggest thing with this whole thing is they moved 1 spot to secure that pick. We see that every once in a while, but it's not talked about enough and how important it is. We talked about it with we did it for the Jets and the Bears in our mock point 2.0, and it's just making sure you get your guy, just moving that 1 spot and not
waiting.
Yeah, not letting the Broncos or the Raiders or somebody jump in front of you. I thought that was a really smart move by them.
Yeah, and so next, obviously, they just trade back 1 spot, and they do the mature thing. All along, we had them go and tackle, and we had them aggressively moving up because we thought that they would try to, do similar to what Chicago is doing and just get Aaron all the weapons that you can.
Right.
And so we moved off of tackle. Olu ended up falling into their lap at 11, and I don't mind the decision whatsoever. It's just kind of hard to see, which of those tackles will be moving inside, at least in the short term.
Yeah, my thing with this whole pick is, for me personally, like I think this is a great pick. Like you said, it's very mature. there's a few tackles that we talked about that weren't going to be ready year one, probably. They needed some time. They hadn't played the position very long. Well, that wasn't Olu. Olu for the last 2 years hasn't had any sacks. He's been pretty amazing as a pass blocker. So, of course, you want the best player, and Olu was the best player here for the tackle position. But at the same time, it's like he's ready to play, and you're going to sit him behind, a pair of veterans when you could have just not paid the veterans and played him. And it's the give and take there that I have the problem with.
Yeah, and again, it was another plan B approach with if it was what would we do, we had tackle is what our thought process was, but receiver was just kind of what sounded like the trend, and that's what we ended up going with our final mock. So we were a little wrong there. Next one, the other one we got kind of chickened out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Day before the draft, Zach Wilson gets traded for a late round pick swap to Denver. That didn't mean that we thought Denver wouldn't draft a quarterback at all, but we thought, oh, you don't have a second round pick. At the time, we're like, oh, it's probably QB5 there.
Right.
And Bo Nix, no one's really targeting him. And yet they ended up still getting the guy that we had all along going there as the Drew Brees 2.0. Walk me through that. I know it's a reach for sure, but it's the fit. And that's what we said before. You rarely ever see guys trading back for quarterbacks,
right,
and then selecting them anyway. It's you either trade up for them or you select them right then and there.
Well, I think Sean Payton, learned from his prior mistake in not going and getting Patrick Mahomes. This is kind of that same thing. I will say personally, the 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks here, JJ, Michael Penix, and Bo, feel like reaches in like when you're just talking about big board position rankings, scouting. But at the same time, we talk about all the time, like you have to go get a quarterback. And all these teams went and got their quarterback. The guy that actually makes the most sense to all these teams, even Atlanta, like if you had to pick one quarterback out of this group who we would say, oh, Michael Penix probably fits Atlanta the best. They all got their guy. JJ McCarthy, he fits Minnesota to me. You look at Bo Nix, he's exactly what you said. Drew Brees 2.0. Sean Payton loves that kind of guy. So all these guys went to the place where we'd expect them to. But on our big boards, they're all in the 20s and 30s. And so they're all reaches in that kind of way. But if one of them pans out, someone's going to be very happy.
Exactly. So, and then another ripple effect was just the historical start of just offensive players, having all 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12. I mean, we at some points had considerations of a lot of people had Penix to the Raiders.
Yeah.
We had them constantly trading up at the tail end of the first round. Some even had them picked at 13, and so riding with 6 quarterbacks in the top 13 picks, and that really shuffled everything up a little bit.
Right.
Especially with this next one, Brock Bowers, another one nobody had going to the Raiders, especially last year investing an early second round pick in a rookie tight end, which we still like and think can be very solid, but the best player available on the board, and they went with it. That's typically not an approach we've seen from the Raiders,
right?
But they got the best available guy for the first probably 2 rounds, and it's not picks that they needed or positions that they needed to target, but guys that made their team better.
So the Raiders really enjoy making splash plays, though, when they pick in the first round, and they haven't, we had the Darius Hayward Bays, he ran the Extend 40. We had all these like picks where, Jamarcus Russell, biggest arm ever, huge guy. This actually kind of feels like a Raider pick to me. It just happened to be, instead of us reaching on a guy, we decided to go with the opposite side of it. It's still a splash play, though. No one saw it coming, like you said. He's basically the best prospect we've ever seen at the tight end position. But his speed, his ability with the ball in his hands, and his blocking ability, that all those things put together make it feel really Raider-esque pick. Well, I will say is, Raiders are going to be running a lot of 2 tight ends. We have 2 really good receivers, but we also now have 2 good tight ends. So we're going to have to play with that, and we'll get mad at them later for other picks that they made. But the first 2 picks, like you said, were really solid.
Right. And so then going on to New Orleans, going with Talise Fuaga again. Olu with our final mock was already off the board. Essentially, we had Talise at 11, Olu at 14, and it went the opposite way. That's based on the Jets trading back and then making that decision. So again, we knew they needed tackle. They were going to take the best one available. We would have mocked whoever the best available on our board was, and Talise still was on the board at 14.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting 3 tackles to be gone at this point, and I also didn't expect him to be the fourth one.
Yep.
You know, this is where the run ends, though. 14 straight offensive players ending. Tackle 4. What is it? 4 tackles, 6 quarterbacks. 2 wide receivers and a tight end. That's crazy.
Yeah, and then Indy was a hot trade commodity candidate. We actually had them trading up to 9 to get Bowers. Sounded like that they were looking for the best available skill player in the back half of the top 10. They ended up staying put and just getting the number 1 defensive player available on their board, and somebody that we were quite happy about that actually felt the same way that we did, because Latu we've been talking about all throughout this past couple months. And so him to be the first defensive player off the board felt pretty good.
Yeah, we actually did a really good job scouting edges based on where they went in the draft.
Exactly.
First 4 in a row. Latu is the number 1 defender on our big board overall. Absolutely deserves this. We can talk. You can go watch our video on our edges, but we talk about how amazing he was throughout this season and the last couple of seasons, and he's got an awesome story. So he's a guy you want to root for. So I'm really happy he went to Indy. He kind of completes their defensive front to me. What they were missing was an elite pass rusher. They had they have Kwity Paye, but he's not elite. He hasn't been elite yet, and this adding Latu makes a lot of sense to me. So
yeah, and then with Seattle, that was just one of the hardest matches to make throughout our mock, and we had him trading back and still picking Troy Fontenot, who we've had them picking at 16.
Right.
In previous mocks, they end up going with Byron Murphy, the number 1 interior edge rusher, and it's not a bad pick. It's just kind of fine for what it is. Slight reach in our eyes.
Yeah.
But we heard that he was going to be a heavily targeted player in the first half of the round.
Yeah.
And he ends up going right in the middle. So
we were only 1 pick off. We had that trade between Indy and Chicago, and Chicago at 15 picked him. So we weren't far off.
Yeah, the range was exactly what we thought.
Yeah. The team, and we talked before, we really thought Seattle needed interior offensive line. But at the same time, we were like, defensive line and edge was actually one of those positions we could have seen them going. We just didn't think that Byron Murphy was the guy. Still don't necessarily. We'll see. But he's a 3 technique that can pass rush and gets after the quarterback. So I think that's something that the league is kind of turning into. So if he does kind of pan out, he has the opportunity to have like the Justin Matabuke season where he gets 10 plus sacks at times. So if he is as good as everybody thinks he is, then that'll be what we'll see. No one, I believe, got Seattle right though on the whole board.
I don't believe so.
One team got Seattle right. I apologize. One person Joel Klatt got Seattle right.
Right. So, anyhow,
yeah.
Making an adjustment. I saw an error there.
No
worries. Wasn't on us. So yeah, with the next move, obviously not less than half of the mocks that we were comparing with, we had 10 total, had Minnesota keeping their other first round pick. And obviously they traded up. 3 of the 4 had them going edge. That's probably what we would have done as well if we were if y'all were like, Minnesota is keeping both first. Who are they going with the second? We probably would have went with edge. They end up trading up to a lot actually to get Dallas Turner. It's a very interesting match. They also had another speed edge that broke out with Houston that they signed for a pretty penny this year, losing Danielle Hunter. So it sounds like they're going more of a speed edge rusher instead of through the interior. So, we'll just kind of see how it works out, but it's something that we didn't expect. to happen.
Basically, how it looks is like maybe they move to a 3-4 or a multi-style defense because now they have in Jonathan Grenard a situational rusher and Dallas Turner, who's more of a stand-up type of guy. Coming from Houston, he played the stand-up outside linebacker. Grenard did, and so I'm just thinking, maybe they're transitioning. Maybe that's what they're going for. But yeah, I think that the match is weird, but the value based on what we have had heard prior is really good. A lot of people saw this being the number 8 pick overall. So getting him 9 spots later, it's really good. We actually had Dallas Turner at 8 also, or actually I think we had the trade. So he would have gone at 10, but he goes to Atlanta just like a lot of people thought. So we were on the same page basically with that. So
yeah, and then the next one, Cincinnati. Again, kind of a plan B of what we would have thought. The one true premise of this was we thought T. Higgins would be moved through the draft, and he was not. He might be appearing on our Biggest Loser video we'll be coming out with soon. But yeah, they end up going with tackle. The interesting thing is just it is massive, the 3 tackles they now have, but none of them have interior experience. And if you want to play all 3, somebody's got to move inside, and I just don't know who's going to between Orlando Brown, Trent Brown, and now Amarius Mims.
I don't think anybody can. They're all 6'8". It's like, how do you play guard at 6'8"? I mean, I guess the power, it doesn't really fall off, but what falls off is the fact that these shorter 6'2" D linemen can get under you and press you off the ball. So I'd be surprised if any of them move inside. And I just feel like right now, Amarius Mims, maybe they saw him like we kind of saw Tyler Guyton as a guy that needed, a little bit of time. And then what they'll do is after Trent Brown's his contract ends, they'll move him in there. So that's kind of where I think they'll probably go with it.
Yeah, and then so we got back on the board with another correct pick. Jared Verse going to the Rams. Shout out you for sneakily switching him and Latu in our final mock. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah,
we were talking about, obviously you have to replace Aaron Donald's production. Doesn't have to be from that exact position. So we had them going edge a few times in our mocks, and Jared Verse was the best available one. Obviously, we didn't expect 3 to go like they did, but it worked out in their favor.
Yeah, we kind of had a trickle down effect here. Basically, Bo Nix or Zach Wilson got signed to go play for the Broncos. So we traded when we had already traded, and we were like, well, we like the trade. We think that Denver needs the assets. So they traded with Cincinnati at 18. We're like, okay, well, they need edge. And at that point, the best available is Latu. Even knowing we had already mocked it differently, where Latu had gone to the Rams at 19, we switched it for that reason because Latu was our best edge on the board, and then Verse, and then it just all worked out, of course. I think Verse makes a lot of sense. He fits their scheme, their style, and he's an explosive, fun player to watch. So I think him going to the Rams is going to be something. And they get the most out of their defensive front. They always do a great job up there, so I think they're going to get even more out of him. So I think it's a good play.
Yeah, exactly. So then we move on. Troy Fatanu going to the Pittsburgh. We talked about him, how he would be projected to move inside. And we actually liked the pick. And we kept it similar because I think that Troy Fatanu is going to be used as tackle at Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And it made a lot of sense. And then seeing what they did later in the draft, I just really, really loved how they put their offensive line together.
Well, we don't want to credit the new OC. Sorry, I'm blanking. The running OC from Atlanta, Arthur Smith, of course. Yeah, I don't want to credit him too much because I'm sure these are his picks in the ear of the GM, of course. But yeah, they did a good job getting guys that are going to help them run the ball and get after it.
So he does get a bad rap, especially in the fantasy community, for just kind of going a committee approach. But he has a a good track record rather of success with his scheme. When he was at Tennessee, they made the most out of scoring an above average clip just running the football.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Atlanta, and then the same thing pretty much happens when he had 2 different quarterbacks back to back with Marcus Mariota, one of the worst passing players in 2022, and then 2023 when he was going back and forth between Heineke and Ritter, which neither were the answer, and they still were putting up 22, 23 points a game. That was a large testament to his scheme.
Right.
Now they go to Pittsburgh. You got to fortify the offensive line, and then you already have 2 good backs. You got 2 good mobile quarterbacks that are upgrades in his system. So I like what they're putting together. They're kind of really maximizing what they're trying to do, which is a good thing because they're always going to outperform expectations.
Yeah.
If you had to power rank the AFC North, a lot of people are going to put them fourth, but I probably am least surprised out of anybody if they're a 10-win team that is in the playoffs once again.
And Mike Tomlin's great, you know. And also they did a good job later in the draft getting a guy like Roman Wilson to help be on the opposite side. You've talked about it multiple times about how they do a great job drafting later round receivers. So maybe this is the next one.
But, then with Miami, 21, we had them trading out of the first round. Didn't have many picks in this draft, no cap space. So we don't really get a grade per se on this pick because we had the Raiders moving up. But we've had Miami going edge due to the needs. We also had them going interior lineman. I don't know what we would have ended up with if we knew that they were going to stay. But they ended up going with Chop Robinson. It makes sense based on the Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips injuries late last season. So I don't know about the exact player per se, but they solved a need that is going to be very useful in the early parts of the season.
Yeah, when we talked about it, it's like we tiered the first 3 up there together, and then it was Chop and then everybody else. And that's basically what we saw. We didn't know where Chop was necessarily going to go. We could have seen him going to Arizona. We could, all around basically the 21 to 32 range, and even outside the first round. I think that this is slightly a reach, but is it a bad reach? I don't know yet because he also grades out as one of the guys that could be the best pass rusher in the whole draft class if he can put together all the pass rush moves that he currently does not have. Right now, he just works on athleticism alone. So if he adds those things, he will be able to do, and 21 is a good spot.
And in addition to, Miami not trading out and staying put, this was our first guy that we did not mock in the first round entirely that ended up making it in. And the main reason behind that wasn't that we didn't believe in the hype of him. It was just that we had both Tampa and Miami trading out. And those were probably the 2 most logical landing spots for him or for that position. And with both of them traded back and we anticipated a run on corners and receivers and Miami stayed put and ended up going with it. Makes sense why they did that. But that's just the premise and reason behind why he didn't make our first round in the mock, our final mock. So moving on to 22, Philly didn't even have to trade up. We had them trading up for a corner. They ended up getting our number 1 corner on the board, sitting and waiting, just worked out for them.
Yeah. Philly killed it when it came to the defensive backfield. It's really hard for me to see how it's possible that they got 2 top 20 guys and neither of their picks were in the top 20 to play, secondary where they had so many issues last year. We already know Bradbury's leaving. And so without him, they already have a replacement. Then later on in the draft, they go and get a nickel safety, whatever you want him to be. They did an awesome job doing, and of course, we get the position right on this, but it's also like we never had a mock
we also
where
didn't.
Mitchell made it to this point. So
multiple times Quinion was going 13. We debated on even putting him at 8 at times. So we didn't expect him to. We would have thought Philly. If we knew Philly is targeting the top corner in this class, we would have thought they probably would have had to move up all the way to Denver, or even the Chargers / whoever's at 11 to move up to get him. And we couldn't justify the cost for that, and because it would have taken another 2nd round pick. And guess what they ended up doing by just staying put? They got 2 of the top 3 defensive backs in this draft class for us. So we were really ecstatic with how they put their draft together. And then Jacksonville traded back with Minnesota from 17. All 3 mocks, we had them going corner. They ended up going a different route because they had the best available skill player fall right into their lap.
Yeah.
So they got extra mid-round picks and were still able to land Trevor Lawrence's future number 1.
Yeah, with the insane amount of offensive players that went early and it being focused a lot on the offensive line, they allowed these types of players to fall.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Brian Thomas being a top 15 player. And that was kind of one thing that we kept saying. It's like, is there a way for him to drop out of the top like 17?
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't really make sense for him to do that. Him falling to 23 is a gift after trading back and basically adding a lot of assets to getting a really good football player and helping a wide receiver room that, we weren't sure what they were going to do yet.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do. Now we know.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the main reason behind us not anticipate, or we thought he would be a top 15 player, but somebody would have had to go get him because 11 through 18, really only Indy is somebody where it's just like, okay, I see why you did that.
Yeah.
Because, they were essentially probably going to go edge or receiver, and they ended up going edge, and then just nobody ended up trading up for him. So he kind of fell right into the lap, and I'm actually surprised a team like Buffalo or Kansas City didn't jump up higher to
exactly.
make sure that they could get him. And then they reacted in different ways. We'll talk about it in a second. But Detroit actually trades up due to the corners kind of falling. They go up, and then they just try to get the best available corner on their board. They go with Terran Arnold. Can't fault the pick. They were just not. We knew that they were going to target a cornerback. We had them going with Kool-Aid, staying put at 29. And they end up getting really 2 high-profile corners as well as Philly. They're probably, obviously, Philly got the more talented players, but Detroit, in the same premise, just triple, quadruple down on the position this offseason. So that's why we were happy with the moves that they made early.
There were 3 teams in this draft that got 6 of our top 8 corners. 3 teams got 6 of our top 8. And it's like, all right, well, they just took the market, and ran with it. This pick, it makes a lot of sense. And I also think that Terran Arnold feels like a Detroit Lion. Like he's that kind of like rugged type of player. Sticky man, annoys you type of player. And I think that he fits really well into what they want to do. And so I really like this pick more so from the fit and the style. Like if there's a couple different players here, say Cooper DeJeans was here, I think Terran Arnold fits what Detroit wants to do more than Cooper would, or Kool-Aid, or even Nate Wiggins. So I think that this would have been the guy number 2 if I was the Detroit board. So
right, and then going to Green Bay, they kind of surprised us a little bit because we had Cooper DeJean multiple times going there. He was available. They passed on him, and then we thought, okay, if they're not going to go there, if Grant Barton's there, fortified, and it feels like a Packer pick. And they end up going with a project tackle. And so it's interesting because they do have a need, but I'm not sure if it's the right fit for either the player or the team.
I think here at this point, like you said, I think Cooper DeJean makes a lot of sense. And I think Grant Barton, if you're going to go tackle, the reason Jordan Morgan makes sense is because he can play both sides. He's a little bit older. He's not going to have as much risk, I guess, but he doesn't have a very high ceiling. And that's my biggest problem with this is when you take a tackle at 25, you want to kind of get a guy that, of course, may be ready to play, but also is going to be capable of being a Pro Bowler or something like that. I just don't know that I think Jordan Morgan can be that guy. I think he's a very safe floor, not a high ceiling. And so that's my problem with the pick. But yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they just lost David Bakhtiari and they needed to replace him. And there it is.
Right. And then with Tampa Bay, again, a team that multiple times we had trading out, so we don't really get a grade per se. We kind of bought into Washington and moving up for a tackle to go up to 26 for Tampa, and Tampa ends up staying put, taking their best available player. I really like the Grant Barton pick for them. It's just something that we didn't anticipate Barton falling this far, and then 2, we didn't anticipate Tampa staying put.
Well, I think we were pretty set on the fact that Dallas was going to go Graham Barton if he was there. And when they traded back and didn't take him, it was like, okay, now are they expecting to get him at 28? Because if they were, they just missed out. You know, it was my kind of thing. If Graham Barton was on their board over Tyler Guyton, who we're going to talk about, and they move back, I would be very irritated as a Cowboys fan.
And I just have a strange feeling that even if both were on the board, they still would have won with Tyler Guyton.
Yeah,
which is
even worse, I guess. But
which I'm glad we didn't have to get to that point. But that's another story for another day. But yeah, moving on, just to wrap things up really quick, Darius Robinson, another guy that was never really a first-round consideration for us. Just kind of a awkward tweener. Is he a defensive interior lineman? Is he an edge? And he goes to 27 for Arizona, which we had them going interior lineman with Johnny Newton.
I think they see him as a 3 technique, and that's why they went with him. He was just the top guy on their board for a 3 technique. Being a tweener makes it a little hard, especially when you run such a slow 40 and don't have an explosive get off. You can't necessarily rush against tackles. It's a lot, you're not going to help yourself as a team putting him out there to rush against tackles. So you have to put him against guards. I think he can do a good job against them. I just think there's better players. I think there were better options. If he's an edge, if you think he's an edge and you think he can play edge at a really high level, that's okay. Then I understand the 27th pick. But he's not an edge in my book. He's a D lineman that has ability to play 5 techniques sometimes.
Right. And then Kansas City trades up to select Xavier Worthy. We were the only one out of the 10 having Xavier Worthy going to Kansas City. The reason behind, we just thought it was a great pairing. And the biggest surprise about this for me was just that Buffalo was the team that traded back. Like, you would think after trading back to give Patrick Mahomes to Kansas City and then the rivalry of just not getting over the hump, you're not going to help reward them with what they want to do. And they ended up doing that. It was pretty strange. I don't think that it's not that, they should have been the ones to pick Xavier Worthy. I didn't think that made sense, but it was just more so who you traded with. And usually you just don't see division rivals or rivals in general making deals.
Right. And also I think also big thing with Buffalo is they don't have a ton of draft picks and they didn't have a ton of cap space. So they were probably looking for a partner, but they could have just traded with Carolina because they did that later anyway.
So I also think that kind of similar to Dallas, I think the guy that they were targeting all along, they kind of had a hunch would be there anyways a little later down the line. And so it made sense to move back. It's just who you made a move with. You should have just made a move in general with Carolina. Carolina probably would have taken Xavier Legette anyways, based on the visits that they had with them. We would have obviously, if Carolina was in the first round, they would have targeted receiver, whoever was the best available guy. And maybe Xavier Worthy falls to Kansas City, maybe not, but just don't give them the chance to get what they want all along.
San Francisco went receiver. Xavier Worthy could have been a 49er.
Exactly.
And you could have been like, look at that. But no, they give them an opportunity to jump in front of them and take their guys. So it is what it is.
And like we briefed on earlier, Tyler Guyton going to Dallas, one that we'll see kind of thing. I feel similar to the Tyler Smith move of just like, you need, at the time, most penalized in offensive line, you needed somebody that was just more refined that could just do the things. He's been great, but he also is highly penalized. Yeah. So it's just taking the good with the bad. With Tyler Guyton, he's a project. Yep. So you needed somebody to replace Tyron Smith right now. Or if Tyler Smith's getting kicked out, then play guard. And I don't think he's ready to do either yet, and he's going to have to. So we'll just kind of see how it works out. But Dallas has had a pretty good track record of offensive linemen drafted early. And so, just got to give somebody the benefit of the doubt if they keep on hitting like they do.
They're really great at it. I just I disagree with the pick, but if at the end of the day, if you look back, they've done awesome. Even we talked about Travis Frederick, 3rd round grade, drafts him in the 1st round. He kills it. Like, you can't be mad at them in the way that they've been picking. So it's like, okay, like what the process, this is a process.
Yeah. Every one of their big 3 was considered an overdraft or a reach.
Right.
Tyron Smith was young, picking ninth. Everybody, that was the historic 2011 draft, so people had them slotted for a corner or
Right.
something of the nature. And then Zach Martin, that was the Johnny Manziel year that even if you weren't going to go Johnny, this guy's never played guard and he's played tackle, and you're just worked out.
Yeah.
And it's hit. And so it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to let you run with it. So we'll just kind of see what happens with that. Baltimore actually surprised a little bit, but maybe it's just because of the amount of tackles that went. They ended up going with Nate Wiggins, who fell a little bit based on where we had him going. We had him all the way at 17 to Jacksonville, and he falls to 30. So it's a good value pick. But, obviously they still need to solve the right tackle position, and they ended up doing that in the second round with Mel Kiper's guy, Roger Rosengarten. Yep. So, not a bad move. No, they needed secondary help.
I think they did a really good job of just finding value in this draft. I mean, TJ Tampa, he dropped to 130, and he was a top 50 guy on mostly everybody's board. Nate Wiggins, probably a top 20 guy to mostly everybody. So that kind of gives you, except for Daniel Jeremiah, he did not like him that much, but whatever, that's okay. But yeah, so they found really good value across this draft, basically, is how I look at it.
Yeah, the one surprise was Ricky Pearsall going to San Fran. Obviously, I watched the announcement of that when we were trying to catch up because we were behind on the draft feed. But not only is it a surprising pick for the reach, but to draft him and then still retain Debo and Brandon Ayuk was very, very puzzling to me.
Yeah, I don't know if they just couldn't make a deal, because they still have time to find a way to move guys around. But it is puzzling. It's definitely odd. I think that the other problem is Ayuk and Pearsall are kind of similar play style. I don't know. And of course it's a reach on our board. I mean, we had him 13th, I think, or 4th, down 13th, I believe. And he's the 6th quarterback off the board, 6th quarterback off the board. So that's definitely a surprise to us both for that reason too. But hey, he's probably a top 70, top 60 player that went, 30 picks too early. So it's kind of rare.
And the other kind of troubling thing that we think about is just the hit rate on receivers in the end of the first is actually one of the lower positions. So we'll be talking about him a little later on maybe a love-hate list. But yeah, we'll just kind of see what happens. But
right.
I don't think it was a need, and it definitely wasn't a value pick by any means.
Right.
And then obviously we touched on Xavier Legette going to Carolina. Didn't have a first, traded up one spot to get him. Met with him many times. We would have had Carolina going some receiver. I don't know if we would have had Legette there. Who knows? But that would have been a position targeted correct that everybody would have got because everybody knew that Carolina needed receivers.
Right, yeah. They didn't have a first rounder, so we can't get graded on it. But if they would have, we would have been right on the money.
Exactly. So but to tally up our little game that we did, obviously kind of middle of the pack in terms of the points, scoring 24 in 6th place. But we hit our goal. Every year you want to hit at least 8 first round matches. We hit exactly 8. Every year you want to have at least 50% of the picks being correct positions targeted. We hit that too. We're a little behind on the first rounder selected. Obviously, Jackson Powers Johnson, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Johnny Newton, A.D. Mitchell, and then Cooper DeJean all fell into the second round. The latest one was 52, so it wasn't like anybody really truly dropped. Like some people had second, and even I think a couple people had a third rounder going in the first. So we didn't do too bad. We feel pretty good about it, especially the real true thing that somewhat screwed up, I guess, the point total to where we're not at the highest of the high is just because we anticipated 8 trades.
Yeah.
And it was a very inactive trade period between, 10
Minnesota
through. There was no big trade up. And then Minnesota really was the only one, like you said, in the top 20 that tried to make a move.
Right.
Or not tried, but executed a move.
Did make a move.
So just kind of put us in the middle of the road, but we felt pretty good about it. A lot of matches we had talked about throughout the summer. So no, not a ton really caught us off guard that other people were already on,
Right.
etc. So felt pretty good about it.
I think second guessing ourselves was one of our biggest downfalls too, because like we said, we had Bo Nix. We had, if we would have stayed with the Joe Alt pick, we really thought that Minnesota was going to jump up, and they just didn't do that.
Right.
So that kind of hurt us, of course. But yeah, so after the derailing of Joe Alt and the Michael Penix pick, it kind of messed everything up at the top of the draft. But we slowly caught a couple here and there. We knew a lot of teams wanted certain positions, though. That's something we really harp on, is trying to get the position over the guy, because at the end of the day, they're trying to fill a hole, and we want to make sure we get the right hole.
Right. And then if you ever are wondering what kind of reporters to target, again, one of my favorites is Peter Schrager. Just his reports are very valid, and he knows who he's talking about. Obviously, he killed it with his points, just blew it out of the water with 33. 12 correct selections is the most. He had 29 out of the 32 in the first round, 21 by far the most positions targeted. And then if you look at his top 12, if you flip Joe Alt and J.C. Latham, he basically got 10 of the first 12 correct.
Missed on Michael Penix and
Brock Bowers, nobody had, but everybody else nailed, and he just flipped those two tackles.
Yep.
And so that was pretty incredible. Just want to give him a shout out. Obviously, we were throwing shade at Bleacher Report. They finished dead last, like we expected that they would. But yeah, it was pretty fun. Again, we appreciate you guys tuning in, not only to the draft, but to our results. Please like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you think. Where did we get it right and wrong? Give us some of your thoughts on some of the selections that took place on Thursday.
Yeah, tell us who y'all thought went to the right place or had the best fit, or all those things, because those things are just as important as the draft pick. If you get one tackle that plays right tackle and you need a left tackle and it's not the right fit, you have to do all of that part of it too. I don't know what, even at Tennessee, what they're going to do with J.C. Latham. Are they going to move him over and put him at left tackle? So that's something we have to look for. Like, comment, subscribe, like Cam said, and we really appreciate y'all being with us, and can't wait to do another live stream and work out even more of the kinks that we had.
We got a couple more draft, I guess, reaction videos to record, but then after this, it's pretty much downtime, boring. We'll do a scheduled reaction when that comes out, I believe the second week of May. And then after that, it's pretty much just speculation and nerdy lists. And then we'll get y'all started on some best ball, some strategies. We'll introduce some maybe salary cap / auction drafts, which we love doing, that no one really covers and touches on. So we're really excited about it. There's so much that we have to talk about, and we can't wait for y'all to tune in. So
yeah, we appreciate it. You have a good one.